Assalamu alaikum. So last week we had studied the 26 word addendum, and we had studied up to the next page. To this point in the beginning, just to recap what this addendum is about. Um, so this addendum is in the 26 word, which Nursi talks about the divine determining and the power of choice. And then he interestingly adds this addendum at the end of it, which apparently means that it's very relevant. It has a significance to do with power of choice or juzi ikhtiyari and qadar. So I think that's like something to keep in mind as we read these to see how Nursi is approaching this. And just, I guess, in a brief recap about divine determining and juzi ikhtiyari was, or power of choice was, you know, basically, practically, it means that you attribute all the good to your creator, or you attribute everything to him until it comes to the point where you have responsibility. You don't completely get rid of your responsibility. You say, I still have this thin slice of choice, that I have a choice that I can make. So everything is from the creator, but I'm responsible for my choice. So the good is, and then you come to the conclusion that the good is from him. And that if there's an evil, it's due to your own choice. It's because of your own, the way you've decided to choose a certain way over another, or chosen to think about something or see something one way or another. And I think just that as a foundation helps us also understand some of the points that Nursi is making in this addendum. But in the beginning of this addendum, he talked about different paths to God. And I won't dwell too much on this, but the path that he is saying is the easiest or the shortest, or a path that might be shorter at least. You know, not saying it's like the best path, but the path that he recommends or that he himself, uh, uh, let's say, experiences or has found is this path of 4 steps. And he says that it is rather than tariqat sharia, and he calls this path so he lists these 4 steps as impotence, poverty, so arjis and fakr, and then compassion and reflection. So there's shefqa and tafakkur. And so these are the 4 steps that he is talking about here. And then he goes on to list 4 verses, which he says points to these 4 steps. So these are not 4 steps that he kind of makes up out of thin air, which, I remember I used to think, or I thought maybe he might have just made it up and it fits it kind of, and then he finds some verses. But I think rather he has read these verses and he's able to then see how these verses point to these steps. And then as he'll talk as we read further, he says that these verses teach. He explicitly says these verses teach, or this verses teaches this. So he's getting lessons from these verses, and then he's kind of just summarizing them, I think, in these 4 steps that we see here, giving them a label. So these 4 verses, we're going to study them inshallah today. The first verse is, therefore do not justify yourselves. And then I believe that's the Arabic. And then be not like those who forget God, and he therefore makes them forget their own selves. Points to the second step. And whatever good happens to you is from God, but whatever evil befalls you is from yourself. Points to the third step. And the verse, everything will perish save his countenance, points to the fourth step. So these are the 4 verses that we will now, inshallah, begin studying. If no one has any further comment to make about last week or something else they want to mention, then we can get started. Okay, inshallah. So the first step, as the verse, therefore do not justify yourselves. And let me just pull up the Turkish so I can have the Arabic ready. second. Okay. Okay, so فَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ is this verse, and therefore do not justify yourselves. So the first step, as the verse therefore do not justify yourselves suggests, it is to not purify the soul. For on account of his nature and innate disposition, man loves himself. Indeed, he loves himself before anything else, and only himself. He sacrifices everything other than himself to his own soul. He praises himself in a manner befitting some object of worship. He absolves and exonerates himself from faults in the same way. As far as he possibly can, he does not see faults as being appropriate for him and does not accept them. He defends himself passionately as though worshiping himself, even using on himself the members and faculties given him as part of his nature, in order to praise and glorify the true object of worship. He displays the meaning of the verse, who takes as his God his own desires. He considers himself, he relies on himself, he fancies himself. Thus, his purification and cleansing at this stage, in this step, is to not purify himself. It is to not absolve himself. I think there's probably value in also just opening up the verse. So here is the verse. So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. الذين يجتنبون كبائر الإثم والفواحش إلا اللمم إن ربك واسع المغفرة هو عالم بكم إذ أنشأكم من الأرض وإذ أنتم أجنة في بطون أمهاتكم فلا تزكوا أنفسكم هو أعلم بمن اتقى. Those who avoid major sins and shameful deeds despite stumbling on minor sins, surely your Lord is infinite in forgiveness. He knew well what would become of you as he created you from the earth and while you were still fetuses in the wombs of your mothers. So do not falsely elevate yourselves or do not purify yourselves. He knows best who is truly righteous. So I think just to touch on maybe one point in this verse that catches my attention is this idea of forgiveness. Inna rabbaka wasi'ul maghfirah. And he knew well what would become of you as he created you from the earth and while you were still fetuses in the wombs of your mother. So this is also kind of touching on divine determining, I see. So do not falsely elevate yourselves. He knows best who is truly righteous. I mean, it's definitely an interesting verse. This idea of elevating yourself, this idea of purifying yourself. And the way Nursi is saying here is that man, maybe it's something that you might disagree with, but he says, for on account of his nature and innate disposition, he says that man loves himself. Apparently, this is like a part of our character. This is a part of our nature. Like it's been given to us. It's been created in this way. I'm not sure what Nursi is meaning here, like, because that almost sounds contradictory for the creator who creates us to worship him, to create us in a way that we innately and inherently love ourselves. So I don't know if what Nursi means there, because I don't think that wouldn't make sense for me. But what does make sense is that we find, or we, let's say through life, mistakenly and wrongly start loving ourselves. Or let's say we have an innate nature and disposition to find beauty or perfection or all these other, power, strength, intelligence, knowledge, all these like names that we are so attracted to. But instead of maybe finding the one who owns these names, the one that all the attributes I see around me actually point to, maybe I come to the wrong conclusion that I am the owner of these names. Like I see wrongly, I see intelligence in myself, let's say, and then I attribute this to myself. So I fall in love with myself. That kind of thought process works more for me. That's how I understand it. So I don't know if I can really accept that it's an inherent nature that we've been created that way, but it is something we fall into for sure. Yeah, so if anyone has a comment on that, go ahead. But then here Nursi's saying that, yeah, we love ourselves before anything else. And kind of it says, and he says, and only himself. You might, I think when I hear this, it says we love ourselves more than anything else and only himself. We might kind of be like, no, that's not true. I love my family. I love my mom. I love helping others. But I think since Nursi right now is talking about kind of a general state that man falls into, or women, like just humans, like a state we fall into. I think we have a tendency to only love ourselves. And I think we'd be surprised to see that this is actually more true than we thought. Because I think some of the biggest pains we take or we feel, and the biggest like enlightenments that we have, like let's say by reading the Quran, or when we go through a pain and then find guidance in the Quran, we see that, oh, I was actually loving myself. You see that, oh, I was actually attributing everything to myself. Oh, I see that the problem here was because I had so much pride, or I thought that I was the owner of this. And then you come to the conclusion that, oh, I shouldn't have fallen in love with myself, or I shouldn't have elevated myself here. I shouldn't have been praising myself, and I should actually be praising him, like the creator. Or I should actually have approached this with a different perspective, or been more conscious about like what these attributes or what these experiences I'm going through actually mean. So I think that we are always surprised, or we always fall into the state where we're kind of surprised by how much we do love ourselves, or how much we do praise ourselves. And it's generally when we go through a difficulty that we kind of are able to pull ourselves out of that and see, oh, I was in that state. So I think this is a correct statement by Nursi, that we do tend to love ourselves and only ourselves. And he sacrifices everything other than himself to his own soul. He praises himself in a manner befitting some object of worship. He absolves and exonerates himself from faults in the same way. Yeah, so he praises himself. He sacrifices everything himself for his own soul. He doesn't, or talking about, let's say, myself, it's very hard for me to not sacrifice everything for my soul. If I do a mistake, it's like, oh, it happens. But if someone else does a mistake, it's like, it's the end of the world. I never, I can't allow it. I can't tolerate it. If someone does something that mildly infuriate, like it's just, I find it mildly irritating. Like maybe what's an example? Like someone cuts me off on the road or something, and I get extremely angry. I'm like, what is this person thinking? How dare they? But then I cut someone else off. I'm just like, sorry, it happens. I think that's like a very clear example of, it's okay if I do it, but not when you do it. It's not, I exonerate myself, or I see that the faults I do are not really faults. I'm just kind of reading what Nursi's saying and seeing if it's true in my life. So if you have a comment, go ahead. That also shows how much you love yourself wrongly. And then, so the next sentence, he absolves and exonerates himself from the faults in the same way. As far as he possibly can, he does not see faults as being appropriate for him and does not accept them. He defends himself passionately as though worshiping himself. This is an interesting point about how we defend ourselves passionately. And when I even think about these, I guess because like there's a reason we're reading these, right? So this is like just to paint the broader picture again. We're talking about divine determining. We're talking about power of choice, and then we're talking about now the first step of ajz. So this is the step of impotence, and then within this, Nursi is pointing to the verse, therefore do not justify yourselves. So there's like a lot of broad strokes, and there's a lot of like themes that Nursi is kind of placing before we're talking about this. But so why are you talking about, let's say, how I severely or I very passionately defend myself? Uh, he defends himself passionately as though worshiping himself. Maybe you passionately defend yourself, but Nursi saying that you defend yourself so passionately, it's like you worship yourself. He's kind of drawing a different conclusion there. And you might say, but I'm right here. You might say, should I not defend myself? Should I not defend the truth? Should I not defend if something I do is correct and something they do is wrong? And maybe to a degree, you could say, yeah, you should defend yourself. Maybe you should defend what's right. But I think from a standpoint of qadar and juzi thari, I think there needs to be a consciousness of saying, do not defend yourself as if you're worshiping yourself. Defend yourself while worshiping God. I think you can consciously be in a state of defending yourself. That is a worship of God. But don't be defending yourself in a state where you're actually worshiping yourself. There's two different consciousness that could be at play there. And I think that's what that means. Even using on himself the members and faculties given him as part of his nature in order to praise and glorify the true object of worship, he displays the meaning of the verse, who takes as his God his own desires. And this is, in Arabic, it's min ittakhadha ilahahu hawa. So he takes as his God his own desires. And we can also take a look at that verse just to see, since Nursi is making a reference to it. So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. أريت من اتخذ إلهه هوى أفأنت تكون عليه وكيلا. Have you seen the one who has taken their own desires as their God? Will you then be a keeper over them? So, yeah, that's that verse that he's making. Again, Nursi is reading other verses and making conclusions. He's seeing what other verses are teaching. And he sees this verse as relevant to this. So I think here the important part to focus is using on himself the members and faculties given him as part of his nature in order to praise and glorify a true object of worship. So we have been given kind of like what we were talking about in this sentence about his innate disposition and nature. So we have been given these faculties and members, such as like I can experience the beauty and the majestic power and the strength when I look at the Grand Canyon, or when I look at the sky, or I look at the moon, or I see a very intricate flower blooming. I can experience all the beauty and the power and the knowledge, the detail, the many names, like the originating, the very innovative new creation I see before me. Many names that I can come to conclude: the compassionate one, the sustainer, the one that keeps everything constantly in motion. Like many names I can experience when I look at the world. I look at myself even. And he says that, interestingly, we use these, maybe not interestingly, but almost like it's become so normal that we use these members and faculties, that these experiences, and then we look at ourselves and then we attribute things to ourselves. Instead of praising the one who is the originator, the one who is the sustainer, we actually say, I am the sustainer, or I am the originator. We start attributing these things to myself. I am intelligent. I know how to handle myself. I know how to make a good argument. I know how to be perfect. Um, all these different things, or I am perfect. And we are now the object of worship, and we are worshiping ourselves. He considers himself, he relies on himself, he fancies himself. It's all about himself. There is no God consciousness here. There is no God centric view. There is no, oh, I am a creation and he is my creator. There is no ujs in this state. You don't feel any ujs. You don't feel any impotence. You feel like you do have power. You feel like you do have strength. You feel that you do own things. And he considers himself, he relies on himself, and he fancies himself. So he doesn't know that he's actually ajis. He doesn't know that he's actually weak and powerless, because someone who knew they were weak and powerless wouldn't do any of these things here. You wouldn't rely on yourself if you understood how weak and powerless you were, and then how you wouldn't fancy yourself either, because you would say, no, I am not the one that deserves to be fancied. Maybe I could be like a mirror to some names, but just inherently by myself, I am not deserving of this. And then Nursi says, thus his purification and cleansing at this stage in this step is to not purify himself. It is to not absolve himself. So to not purify himself, it is to not absolve himself, is exactly what the verse is saying. Therefore, do not justify yourselves, do not purify yourselves, do not elevate yourselves. So his purification and cleansing at this stage is to not purify himself, it is to not absolve himself. So similarly to like when I was talking about he defends himself passionately as though worshiping himself. You're defending yourself in a very self-centric point of view. You're defending yourself as if you inherently have value. So you're defending yourself in a non-God conscious way. And the way you can now purify, if you are someone that defends himself in a non-God conscious way, in a, let's say, shirk way, in a way where you think you are the God, you think you are the owner of the qualities, then your purification, your absolution, or your let's say salvation from this, the thing that will save you from this, the purification for this, is to stop defending yourself. Just stop purifying yourself. Stop seeing yourself as something that is worth, or something that you essentially stop defending yourself, but really stop defending yourself so you stop worshiping yourself. That's the goal here. And practically, I guess, feel free to give me examples or help out. Practically, how would this happen is, let's say I do something and someone says, you did this wrong. What could be an example? I do something at work, for example. And obviously this is not true because everything I do is amazing at work. But let's say I do something at work and someone says, this is the worst code ever. It's like, wait, why didn't you use this? Why didn't you actually use this tool? Are you an idiot? The idiot is kind of maybe implied, not actually said out loud. But then I feel this urge to say, no, this is the actual best way to do it. I feel this urge directly within me to defend myself. And I guess practically this could be how to implement this first step would be acknowledge or see that I have this severe urge in me to defend myself now, to be like, no, the way I did it is the best way. And be like, wait, why am I actually defending myself here? What's my purpose in now saying, no, my way is the best way? I think if I can realize that, if I can catch myself there and say, okay, no, don't defend yourself just to, in a way that would be worshiping yourself. Maybe if, maybe in the beginning, I could just completely not defend myself, like, yeah, you're right. Maybe later on, if it's a different topic, maybe that has more importance to more relevance, I could actually defend myself and try to do it in a God conscious way. We're saying, God has somehow created these names here. So let's say there's a reflection of the name of, there could be a reflection of the name of, let's say, intelligence through the things that I do, or something else. And I could say that no, there isn't reflection of this name, and you saying that there isn't is actually wrong. Like if someone said that, okay, I think I talked too much. I see hands up. So that's all from me. Brother Yusuf, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. So I guess this is so common. What the author describing in here is like me loving myself or defending myself from any sort of defect. And it's so much ingrained in me that I sometimes catch myself when something happens unexpected. Immediately, I find myself looking for whose mistake that is. And that is never including me. Immediately, I look outside. Like, for example, while cooking something falls, let's say. So I immediately look for somebody else who did this. It's not my mistake. Or like this is from everyday life. Sometimes when you're reading the text, let's say, the first step as the verse, therefore do not. So let's say this is how I do. That once I catch myself as misreading a sentence, in order to say that, well, actually, I wouldn't read it incorrect by putting a cuff in between there, as if I'm saying that, oh, there was something in my throat. This is why I misread it. Otherwise, I wouldn't. But actually, the cuffing came after I made the mistake, but I was just trying to justify my mistake. So it is so much in our, it's pretty much like a reflex. But why is it? I guess this is what you were asking, Abdurrahman, initially. So is it really a contradiction that the Creator creates me in such a position? Maybe it's not, because this is a tool, or this is a tool for me to learn something. As the author actually hinting it here, defending himself passionately as though worshiping himself. Like this defending mechanism is necessary, but it needs to change its direction. And as I know of it so dearly in myself, and then I should realize that it is incorrect, and then I should divert this defense to the one who is truly worthy of being praised. So I feel like by applying it to myself, I get to understand its importance or how strong that is. And then once I truly understand to whom that should belong to, with the same, if you like, zeal, I'm going to, or I'm expected to exalt or exonerate the true faultless one, the Creator. And this also reminds me of, now I'm passing to another point, how Yusuf alayhi salam treated the case. Because in Quran, when the story of Yusuf alayhi salam is narrated, the exact same words are going in there, like the nafs is being in there, and inna nafs al-ammaratun bisu goes in there. So indeed, the self or the evil commanding soul commands bad every time. So a very quick recap of what was happening in his case. So like the lady of the house that he is a servant of invites him to herself. And in that initial scene, we see that Quran narrates, وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّ بِهَا لَوْلَا أَرْأَى بُرْهَانَ رَبِّهِ. So the lady inclined towards him, and Yusuf would incline towards her unless he saw the signs of his Rabb. So, and then he escapes, and then the lady tears his shirt from behind, and then the story goes on. then they put him into the jail because the lady was like a wife of an honorable person and whatnot. Then eventually, as we come to the later stages of the story, this is now verses 52, 53, 50 to 53, then Yusuf alayhi salam says, what was the issue with those ladies that cut their hands? So as they're going to take him out of the jail, before stepping out of the jail, he is suggesting them to sort of clarify his name because he was put into jail with injustice. But is he clarifying his name? I think this is the important part because Abdurrahman was again asking the question, am I not going to defend myself even if I did something right? Which is now the case in Yusuf alayhi salam's case. So at the end, now I'm reading verse number 3. So 52 and 53 actually. ذلك ليعلم أني لم أخنه بالغيب وأن الله لا يهدي الكيد الخائنين. This is an interesting verse. So he is saying that the way I did this as such, like asking for the clarification, so that in order that he may know that I have never been false to him in his absence, and that Allah will never guide the snare of the false ones. We can talk a lot about this. I'm not getting into the details of who the he refers to here. But the verse that I would like to focus on is 53. وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي إِنَّ رَبِّي غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Nor do I absolve my own self of blame. Yeah, and now that you shared it, and I do not seek to free myself from blame, for indeed the soul is ever inclined to evil, except those shown mercy by my Lord. Surely my Lord is all forgiving, most merciful. And this, now let's tie it back to the verse at the beginning of the ordeal between Yusuf alayhi salam and the lady. In there, what was the verse? She was inclined toward him, and he was also going to be inclined towards her, unless he saw the signs of his Lord. So again, as if now that we combine the two, Yusuf alayhi salam says, it was not my virtue to be abstained from this wrongdoing. I would be inclined towards that wrong if it was left to me. But it is my Lord's signs that prevented me from going there. So if there's something good in here, it's going to be the truth, which belongs to my Creator. If something that is wrong in here, it belongs to me. Because, and this is really the gist of the topic of Qadr that we are studying. So it's not defending me in this case, really, because he is now saying that truth is my Creator showed me signs, and he also commanded me not to incline towards that way. I just followed how he creates me. What is the other alternative? I would have deviate towards that lady, now that I'm talking about the story, then it would be a wrongdoing and it would belong to me. So وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي in here, as Yusuf alayhi salam says, I'm not cleansing my nafs. I'm not saying that it's free from fault. Nafs is prone to error. It would err. It would make a mistake. But it is my Creator's mercy that protects. It's my Creator's, let me see the verse here again. إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي. Again, mercy of my Rabb that saves me from error. So if there is something to be praiseworthy, it is the mercy of my Creator. It has nothing to do with my nafs.
Yeah, thank you for that. That actually really does fit this first up. The story of Yusuf and him saying, I do not seek to free myself from blame. Brother Beard Khan, please go ahead.
Salam alaikum. First of all, I really took offensive that Yusuf gave all the examples referring to me, you know, trying to read the Arabic and then coughing when making mistake and so on. So that was very personal. The second,
And today you started by coughing as if saying that I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. So outright,
So yeah,
a lot of coughing.
I missed the last part. Sorry, I couldn't hear.
I was just saying that you started with a lot of coughing today, so we should expect even more mistakes.
Oh yes, yes, definitely, definitely. Speaking of mistakes, can you hear me well? By the way, I mistakenly used the wrong
Yes.
microphone at the beginning.
Now,
Okay.
now it's good. Yes.
Okay. Jazakallah khairan. So, like I was asking the same question with Abdurrahman at the very beginning, when author started to talk about the person loving himself, sacrificing everything other than himself for his soul. I was asking, like, is he talking about everybody, or is he talking about just the certain type of people? If you are at this level, you should do this. But if you are not at this level of wretchedness, you don't need to do that. Kind of like Abdurrahman, he's already purified, so he can skip this part. For instance, Abdurrahman doesn't love himself. But when it comes to somebody else, I don't want to give the name, he knows himself. He should study this part because, he should purify himself. Like, is that the way I should read the text? I was asking. Then, sorry. Then while thinking, the hadith came to my mind in which the people, if I'm not mistaken, please, if you are knowing better, please correct me. But people who accepted Islam after being, let's say Jewish, like they were Jewish and then accepted Islam, and when they hear the ayahs about the people worshiping their, let's say, what is the word? Not the mentor, but the clerics, the religious leaders, and so on. They say about the prophet, like we didn't worship them, and the prophet would ask a few questions, things like, did you do everything they do, everything they tell you to do, or did you stop doing everything they ask you to stop doing, and so on, such practical questions. And all of them, they say yes. And the prophet kind of says, this is the way you worship them. So I think we can take the same approach and ask ourselves very practical questions. Like, when was the last time, as Yusuf were giving this example, Yusuf was giving this example, when was the last time you had something wrong in your hands? Like, let's say, there's something in front of you that you don't like. Something is broken, or your child does something, that you don't like, or I don't know, the food, the meal was so salty, and you somehow found a share in this mistake about yourself. When was the last time? Or when was or on the other hand, as again Yusuf was giving the example, who was the first person to blame, yourself or somebody else? Or, ask questions like, when you compare yourself to somebody else in terms of how you dress, how you eat, what you drink, do you always find yourself, doing the best thing? So we see this, especially when we compare the cultures, which is just an extension of our ego, nothing else, right? We say, oh, I cannot believe these Americans, they eat breakfast, in this way or that way. As if the way we eat breakfast is the only way to eat the breakfast. And if you eat the breakfast with like in their ways, you would die or something happen. Like they continue living their life as healthy as yourself or myself, doing something completely different. But we cannot accept this. How dare you eat something sweet in the breakfast rather than eating olives and the white cheese? So, I mean, it sounds, ridiculous. It sounds funny, but when we really ask, and when we try to, investigate what's happening in our mind, if we, get rid of these defense mechanisms of laughing or, oh no, I'm just making joke. If we are honest to ourselves, we will realize that we cannot accept the alternative. The way we eat, the way we dress, all these stupid things, like, I'm sorry, I'm saying stupid, but mundane things, not even, relevant to the reality things. Like whether you drink X or Y, whether you drink X with something or without something. Like we cannot accept any alternatives. I guess such practical examples would show that whatever we see in us, we see it as perfect. That there is nothing about us that needs to be changed. And I guess this is the gist of the matter, change. Because like we can talk about the responsibilities, we can talk about the blame. And we can say, to me at least, it is really easy to say that, oh yes, I should take the blame. Like I do a lot of mistakes and I should take the blame. To me, again, it is easy. And sometimes I even enjoy taking blame. It sounds as if, I'm so humble, I'm so pious. Oh, you can always take the blame. But I still keep continue doing the same thing. So I don't think I should change. It's only just taking the blame. It's like, another way of being, proud of myself. So to me, here in this text, the point is not to take the blame, but rather to realize that you are ajiz. You are in ajiz. Well, I don't know how to put it in Turkish plus English way. That you have the ultimate impotence. So what it means you cannot look at yourself and think that there is nothing in you that needs to be changed. You cannot think that you are perfect in this state. Oh, Alhamdulillah, my God has created me in a perfect way. Yes, it is true in one way, but not the way we are using. That the way I talk is great, nothing needs to be changed. The way I drink, the way I dress, the way I interact with people, the way I ask questions, the way I give the answers, they are all perfect. Nothing needs to change. So without stopping this attitude that, I will continue being what I am, there's no need to change. But still, I find the truth. I guess this attitude is just the opposite of being impotence. It means you already have everything. You are not searching. Being impotent, yes, partly taking blame, but taking blame is, it's not a solution. I guess the solution is, again, just realizing that you have nothing. Whatever you think you have is, needs to be corrected, needs to be purified. So you don't purify yourself, meaning don't say whatever I have already is good. Search for better. So this is how you, follow the prophet. Following prophet is a search, saying that, the way I talk needs to be corrected. The way I eat my food needs to be corrected. The way I think, the way I, approach people, the way I approach the problem needs to be corrected. I need guidance in everything. Again, if you look at yourself and ask the question if this is the case or just the opposite. To me, it's mostly opposite. What I do, I look at others and see things to be corrected through comparing to myself. I say, Alhamdulillah, I'm humble. She's not humble. Let me talk to her so that she knows about the humility. Alhamdulillah, I take things seriously. He does not take things seriously. Let me talk to him to teach him how to take things seriously. Alhamdulillah, the way, I eat my breakfast is right. The way he eats his breakfast is not. Let me teach him. So, of course, we will, teach people if we, have something in our hands, if we think it's valuable, there's no shame in that, and so on. But being in constant search of better and saying that, I need guidance, I still need guidance. I need to be corrected constantly. I guess this is the importance. It's not only, again, saying that, yes, I do a lot of mistakes. All the time I do a lot of mistakes. I prove myself. I need to be punished. And what happened next? Nothing. I was punished, so I got what I deserved, and I will continue living the way I live. I guess this is not the art. This is not the importance. If I'm already perfect, if I'm already the complete, then I'm not important.
Jazakallah khair. Yeah, I think just to reiterate, one of the points is, as this is the step of, it's the step of feeling that you are not enough, or feeling that you don't have the ability or the power to do it by yourself. It's realizing that you don't have that foundation to like kind of just seek or to rely on yourself, that you see that relying on yourself and thinking that you are complete by yourself is not, it's not true. And this probably seems very odd to a lot of the kind of the mentality that we're being exposed to, maybe in this current time, because of the current time of, no, you can do it, you have to believe in yourself, this and that. I don't think these statements, like they're innocently said, and I think it can help some people to some degree, but the foundation of it can be very if the foundation of this is thinking, no, I'm awesome, I can do it, I'm actually like an amazing person, I just have to believe or fake it till I make it, I can do it. I think the foundation for this kind of understanding is only going to leave you in ruin, or it's not going to be a state of peace, at least not a state of purification. Whereas I think when you can come to this understanding of no, I am weak. Like I am weak. When you can say that, and you can say I am weak and I need help, and ajz, I am ajz, and therefore, because I am ajz, then I don't purify myself, or I see that I can improve myself in ways. I see that uh, I need to keep searching, and now I could try to be more God conscious. I could try to be more reliant on my creator rather than myself. I could try seeking help from a source that can actually provide help rather than just thinking I can help myself and I can be enough for myself. So maybe the in action wise, these two people might not even be that different, but I think where the path goes, like one that starts with God consciousness and has the mentality of, Bismillah when he takes a step, rather than saying, I take a step with my own power, my own strength. I'm going to do this by myself. He starts off the road this way, but the other one starts with the Bismillah and says, no, I am not the powerful one, but I start in his name. I take the step in his name. I try to learn in his name. The end result will be the one that starts with Bismillah will go much further. Will go all the way. But the one that starts in his own name is going to end up in ruin. And this is actually one of the words that Nursi actually writes about. But I see that the state of arjs is very important there. It's the state of saying Bismillah and not relying on yourself. Seeing that you should be more God conscious. But I think practically, just Nursi, he gives a very practical approach to this too. Like I think there's many deep meanings you can understand here, but the first step, maybe the next time you feel like, oh, you want to defend yourself, or next time you feel this urge to say, no, I am right and they're wrong, my culture is better and their culture is worse, or something like this, take a step back and be like, wait, what am I defending here? And who am I worshiping with this defense? And maybe just don't do it. And this could be helping you to purify yourself. Yes, go ahead, Brother Yusuf.
So just to chime in very quick. So in case of Yusuf alayhi salam, he showed them that their blame was wrong, but he didn't purify himself. He's purified his creator. So there was something wrong, and he eventually declared that it's wrong. But as he was part of that ordeal, he didn't say that I am right because I am, but he said, my creator made this case correct. Perfectly aligned with how we have been studying with the 26th word. Anything that's good is from your creator. And then you take the things, only those that are blameworthy. So you cannot, this is why you cannot really purify yourself, cleanse yourself, or claim any good to yourself. So just wanted to highlight.
Go ahead, Brother Yusuf.
I think what Yusuf just said is really important. So when we study such text, it may sound as if like, okay, you should you should mind your own business. There's a lot of things to be corrected about yourself. You have nothing. Invest on yourself and someone. What we say, or at least what I say, may sound like this, but it's just on the opposite. It's not it's not a journey of, let's say, what is it called? Like there are these type of books,
Self-help.
self-help maybe. So this is not a journey of self-help. This is not a journey of self-improvement. Okay, that was the word. Self-improvement. It's just realizing that that you need guidance, and it comes with honesty. And when you have this honesty, it is actually easier to see that the others also need guidance. So when you see a mistake being done, you are not afraid to say that this is wrong. And you should say it, this is wrong. And like this is a little bit, this may sound a little bit complicated or paradoxical, but once you start not purifying yourself, not glorifying yourself, it also becomes easier to be honest about the mistakes of others as well. Because most of the times we cannot freely speak about the mistakes of others because we're afraid that the same thing happens to us as well. Meaning, if I, point out the mistake of Abdurrahman, then somebody else may point out my mistake as well. And I'm so scared of somebody finding a mistake in me because I am perfect and I cannot be doing any mistake. When we stop glorifying myself, when I realize that I'm nothing close to be perfect, that I have nothing, it is easy to realize and accept that this is true for others as well. So because we are on the same level, it would be easy for me to say that I'm sorry, Abdurrahman, what you do is wrong. And I won't be scared that he may find out or point out my mistakes as well. That's okay, because I already know that what I do is mostly wrong. I need guidance. I know, Abdurrahman, I need guidance. And Abdurrahman, you need also guidance. So again, like I see this a lot in my relationship with others. When I'm not afraid of, freely speaking of my mistakes, my own mistakes, I'm not afraid of freely speaking of others' mistakes as well, or vice versa. If I'm afraid to point out a mistake of a person, it is mostly because that I'm afraid that same thing will happen to me as well.
Thank you for all your comments and help in understanding this. I think we can move on to the second step. So the second step, as the verse, and be not like those who forget God. He therefore makes them forget their own selves, teaches, man is oblivious of himself and is not aware of himself. If he thinks of death, it is in relation to others. If he sees transience and decline, he does not attribute them to himself. His evil commanding soul demands that when it comes to inconvenience and service of others, he forgets himself. But when it comes to receiving his recompense and to benefits and enjoyment, he thinks of himself and takes his own part fervently. His purification, cleansing, and training at this stage is the reverse of the state. That is to say, when oblivious of himself, it is to not be oblivious. Meaning when he doesn't think of himself, or those states in which he would never think of himself, stop doing that and actually start thinking of yourself. That is to forget himself when it comes to pleasure and ambition and greed, and to think of himself when it comes to death and service of others. So this is another interesting step. So this so this verse here is from so it's وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُم. It's from Surah Hashir. Let me try to pull that up. So وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُم أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. And do not be like those who forgot Allah, so He made them forget themselves. It is they who are truly rebellious. So this is in Surah 59, verse 19. And he's saying here that, again, this verse is teaching. And just as a reminder again, the second step is about faqr, or it is about being poor. What was the exact translation? Poverty. The second step is about poverty. And this is the verse that he is saying that teaches this step of poverty. And again, the verse is, be not like those who forget God. So apparently you can be like someone that forgets God, and He therefore makes them forget their own selves. And when you forget God, it seems that you forget your own selves. This is what the verse is saying. And then Nursi is reading this verse or interpreting this verse and saying that man is oblivious of himself and is not aware of himself. I'll read the next sentence as well. And then if he thinks of death, it is in relation to others. If he sees transience in decline, he does not attribute them to himself. It seems like now you're saying the opposite of the first step in some ways, because in the first step, you're saying man only thinks of himself. He only loves himself. He sacrifices everything for himself and his own soul. But now we're saying man is oblivious of himself and is not aware of himself. If he thinks of this, it is in relation to others. If he sees transience in decline, he does not attribute them to himself. So this is here when it says that man loves himself is much different when it's saying that man is oblivious of himself. These are talking about two separate things. Here, you love yourself. You try to defend yourself. You try to always come out on top. Try to find perfection in yourself. Worship yourself by defending yourself. But in this one, man is oblivious of himself in the sense that you are not aware of your state. You are not aware of your own reality. Something like death, which we should all realize is something we actually live at every moment, at every day. But for sure, we at least know that at the end of my life, there will be the very real death of this body, at least. But whenever I think of death, it is in relation to others. I don't see death as something that will affect me. I am oblivious of this, or I try to ignore it. I completely block it out. Like it's a very if I see that it's for others, if I see like war happening, or if I see something bad happening, or if I see someone gets in a crash, that's something that happens to others. It doesn't happen to me. And if he sees transience and decline, he does not attribute them to himself. This is, I'm not sure what Nursi is meaning by this, because I'm sure like if you see yourself getting old, if you see yourself getting slower, I don't know, losing some of your faculties as you get older, I don't see how you can't attribute that to himself. But I think in terms of transience and decline, maybe this is thinking you don't see that you don't see yourself as a temporary being. You think that you're somehow permanent. Similarly, you don't think of death because you think you are invincible. Maybe you think that you will always be here, that you are a constant. But in reality, you are actually a very constantly changing temporary being in terms of your life on this planet, in the world. In the next sentence, his evil commanding soul demands that when it comes to inconvenience and service of others, he forgets himself. But when it comes to receiving his recompense, his payment, and to benefits and enjoyment, he thinks of himself and takes his own part fervently. So, how to understand this sentence? He evil commanding soul. Because now it seems there seems to be like a jump in what we're talking about. Like now we're talking about service to others. So maybe keep that as a question in your mind, how service of others is relevant to this while we listen to Brother Birkan make his comment.
Assalamu alaikum. I'd like to ask a question, not a comment, about the verse at the beginning. Those who forget God and he makes them forget their own selves. So how do you understand this verse? I'm trying to, have an understanding that would fit to the text that we read. Like you forget God and God makes you forget yourself. And author here is talking about, when he talks about forgetting himself, is referring it as, not putting yourself into the equation, kind of, that you see death, you think about that of others as if it will not come to you. So how forgetting about God put you in such a position that when you talk about that, you talk about somebody else's or others' death. And this is because you forget God. How?
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. If I may, Saira here. I think it's a very palpable truth. Whenever we are reading Quran, different snippets of surah, verses might make it very clear. Whenever I think there is a description of two men or a couple of men or a man coming from the rest of the Medina city and trying to convince the rest of the people about Allah Ta'ala's power and stature as the omnipotent God, somebody who is all observing, all hearing. That reminder has been given by Allah Ta'ala in those anecdotes of people who, when they looked at their garden, they forgot to say mashallah or inshallah, or they just thought that everything is unto themselves and because of themselves. And hence Allah Ta'ala right away points out that, and we destroyed his garden, or we toppled nations because they were transgressing and they were disbelievers. And so I find it personally, and also as I am recognizing with more in-depth study with Quran, alhamdulillah, to recognize that Allah Ta'ala's presence in that instance as a reminder, and to be reminded of his presence as the Al-Hayy, Al-Qayyum, and also Rahman Rahim, but Al-Jabbar as well, is that having a high opinion with Allah Ta'ala, of Allah Ta'ala, allows us to know that this is my safety net. If I remember Allah and if I'm God-fearing, then it is logical statement in my resolution to stay within the parameters of his ahkam. And if I'm not, then I'm a freewheeling spool which can harm itself and harm others. But that distinction in intellectual acceptance of that vulnerability without having any kind of, it sounds frivolous now to say the word arrogance for my own self, because I look at myself and I say a dot or a speck of a dot on this whole universe. And the Qadir, Allah Ta'ala, what hasti is he? Against whom, God forbid, or in comparison with whom we, collective we, humanity, or some of us think that we can play God. We are in delusion of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's role can be assumed by us. I have even heard people sometimes say that I am asked by Allah Ta'ala to be the viceroy. And hence the decisions that I'm making, those are practical decisions. I have to make them deliberately violating any of the ahkams and not realizing that on the one hand, yes, Allah Ta'ala has given us dignity, I think which we were talking about earlier, the humility and the dignity that is our hallmark as humans with aql. But then the mechanisms of the diseases of the hearts are that's where the temptations get our best. That yes, I became a leader and now I'm that much more vulnerable to make deceitful decisions against my people and eating away their rights or not being just in inheritance. Or so in applicability, my thought is about the application. Once you know the knowledge and you are privy to it, just like subject himself or herself cannot have objects. They can have objectives, but they cannot have like objects under them or further subjects under them. So in that sense, making sure of this second step, that we forget about ourselves, that we are just as vulnerable. Like I can take my example, me not having children, me being a young widow, me being a cancer patient, me being a therapist, me being a Pakistani American, me being very vocal about don't say anything about Islam or else I'm going to teach you something about it. But there is also that side of me that is humble, that is recognizing that I own different aspects of my persona, and it is all with the will of Allah. So right now, this moment, why I'm in the circle, why we are listening to each other, what makes us be who we are, knowledge seekers with humility, complete humility, even though we may have learned about Quran something, it doesn't mean that the person next to me is any less or I am any less. It means that we are all just like birds eat from the same feeder. They're all having their own sustenance. And so the plane is level field in most cases when you have reached a certain level of acceptance with complete wholeheartedness about our need and Allah Ta'ala's granting. That I am in need of Him every second of my existence, even beyond the world's existence, in the qabr, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, even when I'm in Jannah, because my objectives are that I need to do right by Allah and His creation. And then for the sake of Allah, lately I'm even telling myself that I don't need to pray to Allah to ask Him for something. Yes, I should ask Him because He's the only giver. But what a selfish way of wanting to say to Allah, oh, I'm going to pray all my prayers because I have some prayers to make of you. No. That's exactly perhaps He's pointing when He's putting through trials that show me what you got in terms of your aqidah and your tawakkul. Not that I need it from you, but because that's a reflection of how you are perfecting or purifying your iman. And alhamdulillah, that insight, at least in my sense, has made me more humble and more seeking of knowledge and realizing that there is a lot more there for us to learn from Quranic ayats as well as from the Sirah. Why is it that certain Anbiya even argued with Allah Ta'ala, Allah Ta'ala, what more you are going to put me through? Or I have done my best with these people, but they still don't listen to me. Or all of the women who have made prayers like Hazrat Maryam alayhi salam, that Allah Ta'ala protect me, and her mother said that Allah Ta'ala protect my daughter and her offsprings, because we need Him. He created us, he knows us best, and he knows our vulnerabilities, and he also knows the situations he will be putting us through. Our job is to recognize that particular position that we are in, which is hope and fear, between hope and fear. And cleansing is possible, granted that we recognize the importance of that purification. Jazakallah khair.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. Thank you for your comment. If anyone else has a so there was a question posed by Brother Bikhan about how this verse seems relevant to the second step, because the verse is saying, "Be not like those who forget God, and He therefore makes them forget their own selves." If you have other things to add or have a comment on how it seems to be relevant to the second step, please feel free. Do you have an answer now that you've thought about it more, Brother Bikhan, or I'll let you stew on it longer then? Oh, okay, no, you are in the participants. Okay, I thought you left us with the question and escaped, but you're still here. Okay, I think, yeah. I mean, my very first basic answer would just be what I understand from the verse when I read the verse is, first of all, how can I forget God? Like, I have to ask myself, what does it mean to actually forget God? And I think maybe one of our states that we are mostly in is a state where we are forgetting God. He's not this creator, this doer, this fashioner, sustainer. He's not really in our conscious. He's not in the forefront of our minds, in decisions we're making. We're not acting in a sense of realizing that I am poor and I need a God, kind of. We're more like, no, I just am, and I kind of just am acting. So for myself, at least, I'll say that it's kind of the state I usually find myself in, if I'm being honest, just a state of forgetting God. And then the verse continues, and He therefore makes them forget their own selves. And the way I read this is not like, the second part is not a punishment for the first part, or it's not like, oh, because I forgot God, now He makes me forget my own self. The way I understand this is, because I am in a state of forgetting God, that means that I'm also in a state where I also am forgetting myself. Because God has no place in my mind, then it also means that I don't know who I am. It means that I don't know my state on this planet. I don't know my state as this person that I'm now breathing. I have life. I'm talking. But why? Like, what's the purpose of all of this? I don't know, because I don't know what I am. I see myself as someone who works. I go to work. I come back. I eat. I sleep. I go. I enjoy. I do some entertainment, maybe some sports, something else. But this is what I see my life as. I don't see myself as a creation of God, let's say. And I think because I don't see myself as a creation of God, that's why I don't think about death, or I'm not aware of myself in the sense. And I think this is how it's relevant to what Nursi is writing. I don't see who I am, or I don't see my purpose. I don't see like what I'm created for. Let's say like I'm being created for a reason. And I don't see that because I don't think about my reality, which very simple things actually that Nursi is even mentioning here is your death. It's a very, everyone can accept this. Like, this isn't even saying that, oh, your beauty or your intelligence is a creation by God. No, it's a very practical example of how we forget our reality, or that I'm not saying you're poor, and I'm not even saying that you are impotent and powerless. I'm just saying you're going to die. This is a very simple thing. And that's something we forget. Maybe if we did remember it more, or if I did sit down and remember, oh, I'm going to die, instead of just like maybe even going to a cemetery and passing on like, oh, these poor people, they died. Like if I say, oh, no, I'm actually going to die, then I would reach a state where I actually remember God. It would take me there. But I forget myself because I don't think about that. Or if I see transience and decline similarly, I I see myself as permanent. I don't see myself as poor again. As a second step is I don't see myself in a state of neediness at all. And because of that, I think that I will just be as I am forever. And again, that's not because I kind of forget my reality. And I think that's just forgetting myself, because myself, or let's say whatever this myself is like who I am. And who I am is not a powerful, wealthy, independent creation or independent being, who I am is actually a needy being, a needy, created, dependent being. So I think that's what it means to forget myself. And that's just me talking quite a bit. Yes, Brother Yusuf, please go ahead.
So it looks like author is contrasting death with joy here. Like whenever he thinks about death, if he sees transience and decline, he does not attribute it to himself. So death is the opposite, or as Rasulullah puts it, death is the spoiler of joys. And since I'm inclined towards joy, or to the extent that I'm inclined towards joy, I don't want to think about death. Because as I think about death, like everything disappears, all my career goals or the house that I am dreaming, buying, or whatever, like they become so meaningless, so valueless. So this is what I would like to push away. I mean, to the extent that I would like to enjoy the joys of life, I have a tendency to forget about death. And since it's inevitable to think about death, whenever I see it, I forget it on my own behalf. So if death happens, it happens to like somebody else. Don't spoil my joy. This is my attitude. So this is why the contrast here is about ambition and greed versus death and service. So because death and joy is so much, or ambition are so much contrasting each other. This also reminds me of the service part. Service to whom? Like in translation, it says service of others, but is it that, or is it something different? Makes me think. So service. So at the time, there was this, like in the life of Prophet ﷺ, there's a picture. Like some people come to him and say, if we accept your invitation, what will be our gain? This is one attitude. Another attitude, they say, if we accept your invitation, what is upon us, in the sense of what am I supposed to do now? So in one hand, the first group is expecting for, I'm going to choose you if you pay me, or if God pays me something. The second approach says, I'm going to accept your message now, and now tell me, what am I expected to do? What is the duty on me? So these are two very opposite approaches. The first one is the approach of the one who is looking for a worldly gain or joy, which was explained or depicted in the life of Prophet as either the Abu Jahl sort of people, or like different tribes that are coming for the gain. The second part was the type of people who were there for, or who we are later on seeing as the ones who really carried the message to us even up to today. So this service part is, now that I am seeing that I am being provided 24/7 with everything in this life, what is expected from me should be my attitude, like the service in this sense. But rather, I might take also the position of, oh, if I do this, what would God give me, sort of an attitude. because still I am looking for more of joys. And the joy meaning in the sense of like worldly joys, because just to add what I mean by worldly joys, I might be enjoying the taste of a fruit just because it's tasty. This is a worldly joy of a fruit. I can also enjoy the same fruit because it's a gift of my creator. The second joy is a heavenly joy, because even if you eat and consume the fruit, that joy, the second type of joy, will stay with you. You will say that, oh, my provider, my sustainer is eternal. But the first type of joy disappears as the fruit goes and gets lost in your mouth. So that's why, which type of joy am I after? And in this second step, and by the way, those 4 steps are not a one-to-one mapping with the initial 4 like aciz, fakr, şefkat, tefekkür. I think he is in general saying that this path is sitting on top of these 4 major, if you like, pillars of aciz, fakr, şefkat, and tefekkür. And then he says this consists of 4 steps, and now he's talking about those 4 steps. 4 steps are going to be sitting on top of those 4 pillars. This is how I understand them. And now in the second step, I am forgetting the creator. And then the concept of he disappears in my understanding. And then all I am now concentrating on is joys of myself. And now this verse is saying that don't be like those who forget the creator, and then the creator makes them forget themselves. What self is being forgotten in here? Because still I am so much after myself when it comes to joy. But it is that I am forgetting my reality. I am dying. And this practically is what's going on in here, right? When it's a matter of death, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to remember it. And especially, like, it's very obvious in the current civilization, death is a taboo. And like in modern cities, graveyards are being made to the faraway places. So because we don't want to remember that, and it's a taboo to talk about death or bringing up death in any conversation. And in my personal life also, I have a tendency not to remember it. And it all boils down now to say that just do the opposite of this. When it comes to those joys of life and the ambitions of life, then remember of death, really, because this is going to spoil all those false pursuits of the self, of the nafs.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. We are out of time. We can continue off, or whoever is doing it next week can continue off from the second step, inshallah. Thank you everyone for your comments and attending. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة والصلوات.